It was down here at the Portsmouth Naval Hospital, because there was a launch of nurses going ashore, and I pulled up alongside of them with this nice shiny new gig, and I was kidding around, asking who wants to write, you know, how smart sailors are. I just all of a sudden made a hard veer to the left. I didn't want to open throttle too much because I'd rocked the launch, you know. As soon as I got a little piece away, I shoved the throttle forward and it run right into that big boy, and it stuck out of the water 6 to 8 foot, but I hit it. But anyhow, you can ask Steve sometime you see him. When I introduced myself to Chun Sedanovitz up in, or down in Lancaster at the party, the guy that was talking to John, and I can't remember his name, but he was just a little guy. He still could wear his uniform. As a matter of fact, he placed the wreaths in the water in honor of the guys that have passed on since it's over. Mm-hmm. And the first thing he said to me when I introduced myself, John had a study for a while. I said, well, shouldn't have to study. I said, I wore your money belt with your wife or with your family's picture in it, and you wore my money belt in case something had ever happened. He said, oh my God. And he said, my bar hook. That's how he started out. Then the other fellow said, is he the one that got messed up with the boatload of nurses? So he remembered that one. So I asked Steve, because this guy said to me right away, remember the nurses? So I don't know if he may have been my bar hook then at that particular time, because he was, that guy was a fellow by the name of Podacker at that time, just a little short guy, and this is just a little short, skinny guy. He still could wear his uniform.
So how did you get the boat repaired without getting in trouble?
Well, Lieutenant Marks was boat division officer, and we also
What did you take a nap, honey?
had a fellow by the name of O'Brien that had become Tom Sawyer's. Tom Sawyer was still leading boatswain mate, but this O'Brien was in charge, was the leading boatswain mate of the boats. And
did you take a nap?
Lieutenant Marks, it just so happened that that same day, one of the other guys, you had two types of boats. They had one that had what they call vacuum control. In other words, you could be running full speed forward. You could slow down, or you could go from there to full speed reverse. But whatever you had to do, you had a little brass handle that stood up about this high, and you had a half-moon sundial. I can picture them as plain as day. And that sundial had notches in it, had a neutral spot in the middle. Well, whenever you were going to shift gears, from whether it was forward to reverse or reverse to forward, you had to bring it back and stop it there for just a fraction of a second, and then bring it back. Well, what happened, and I can't think of the guy's name, Hupley once said, but I can't think of his name. He come in around the ship. He had been on a stores run, come back and unloaded the boat with some stores that he had ran after, went around the ship, and we were moored along. Oftentimes when you were in port, you were either moored to a boat boom that was strung out at the end of the boat, or you were tied up at the dock or alongside the ship. He come in around it, went to shift from forward to reverse, and we were with them boats just like kids are with cars. I mean, you run them. And he never stopped, so he piled headlong into the pier and split one open. And they were still hoisting that aboard when I come flying around the ship, running circles because it was going down. And when they got me on the David and picked me up and took the trucks out and left the water all drain out of it, and got up and got aboard. Lieutenant Mark said to O'Brien, Toby O'Brien, and this is the first meeting he missed because he had just passed away. But he said to Toby O'Brien, look what your protege done now, because I was real young, you know, for doing that. So he said, I want a written report. So I went and talked to Sawyer, and Sawyer said, well, I don't know what to tell you. He said, what went on? So I told him. I said, I was just clowning around with a long, slow no nurses, and when I throttled up the lever, of course, now I had one of the newer ones. You had a gear shift lever with the throttle on the handle, and I said, I just didn't see the buoy and hit it. It's lucky I didn't knock the guy that was polishing bride work on the bow in the drink. But anyhow, he said, I don't know. He said, go talk to your Dalgazo. Had just been promoted to chief, and he was master of arms. He said, go talk to Chief Master of Arms and see what he says. But he said, if Mark's ordered you to turn in a written report, you got to give him a written report. So I went and talked to Dalgazo, and Dalgazo laughed. He said, well, just write down carelessness and turn it in and give it to him. Just tell him you weren't paying attention. Don't tell him what happened. So I did. He tore it up. He said, that's no report as far as I'm concerned. I want a written report. So I went back and told Dalgazo. I said, Mark's tore it up and said, that's not a report. He said, I figured that's what he'd do. Now, this Dalgazo was a regular Navy man. He had been there for years. He said, I figured that he wouldn't take that as a report. So he said, write it down again and give it to me. Because Marks had put me on report, which means you go before the executive officer or the captain for like a hearing. And so he said, give me an exact word thing like you wrote him. He said, I should have told you to make a duplicate copy, or a carbon copy, but he said, just give it to me, wrote it out the way you did. So then we get the executive officer's mask, and he told me when we go there, ask for a captain's mask. I said, geez, I don't want to ask for captain's mask. I said, if I get away with it, everybody on the ship's going to say it's because he was in the gig with the captain, or if I don't get away with it, I'm going to face a stiff penalty, a big fine, and probably get busted. I said, you aren't going to get busted. So that's what I did. Had the captain's mask, and he asked Lieutenant Marks read off, well, the Master of Arms read off the charts, and said that, I was thinking it was boatsmate second then, or coxswain, and he said, my name, serial number, all that, said he had turned in a report, and Marks tore it up. And Mark said, well, I didn't consider a report. All he had on was carelessness. And captain threw it out and said, well, if he told you it was carelessness, that's a report to me. So I got away with that one. And then later on one day I was taking him somewhere, and he was up at the front like he did, and he said to me, hey, Boots, what actually happened that day you hit the buoy? So I told him.
This was the captain?
Yeah.
Which captain was this, do you remember?
Sweeney.
Sweeney?
He was a good one.